For anyone that wants to do filmmaking or storytelling, you have to build a sense of trust with the people that you are working with. And I think the greatest gift, because I did this project over 4 years, was that I had plenty of time to build that trust and to, I think, get more authentic stories as a result and responses to questions.
Hi, and welcome to Beyond Empty Nest. I'm your host, Jody Silverman, speaker, mentor, and Chief Dare Officer at Moms Who Dare. Every Thursday, I'll share stories of midlife transformation, happiness tips, and dare you to see the opportunities waiting for you so that you can make this next chapter even better than the last. If you're ready to dare, I'm ready to dare with you. Let's get into today's episode.
So, what would you say is the secret to living a life well lived? Maybe it's living one day at a time, getting comfortable with being yourself, or whatever happens, no matter what happens, never, ever, ever become a victim of your life. Well, those are just a few of the pieces of advice the women and men in my guest book and documentary that they share about how to live a life well lived. And they all know this because they have lived their lives really well. Today, I get to introduce you to the woman behind the documentary of the same name, Sky Bergman. Sky Bergman, Professor Emeritus of Photography and Video at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, is in her third act after a 30-year teaching career. Her artwork is in prestigious museum collections, and her commercial work has appeared in renowned magazines like the Smithsonian. Sky's passion is creating films and projects that inspire intergenerational connections, emphasizing the power of shared stories. Following her successful PBS documentary, Lives Well Lived, her book, Lives Well Lived Generations, distills wisdom from the film, celebrating life's essence across generations. Welcome, Sky.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jody. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. So we have to let everybody know a little bit before we dive into your story. I talk to my audience a lot about daring, stepping out of your comfort zone, trying new things. Every time I dare and say yes to going to a women's empowerment, whether it's a full day experience or a weekend retreat, I meet somebody who brings value to my world. And you're one of those people because we met at Quest 2024 in Bristol, Rhode Island. Our friend Diana Place brought us together. And not only did you inspire me, but you talk about lives well lived and bringing intergenerations together. And I met your mother too, and she is totally inspirational. And I'm just going to share with you out there that if you've never said yes to attending a women's empowerment event, you don't have to be in business to attend them, to gain value and insights. And you might even have a big aha moment. I've had them too. So you're one of those wonderful people that I got to meet this year. And now look, I get to host you on my show. So this is
I
great.
love it.
So tell I always like the backstory. We have to know. So how'd you come up with this idea of lives well lived? How did you even begin to say, okay, well, I'm going to shoot a film, a documentary, and then a book?
Well, that's a really good question, because I really was a photographer up until the point that I started working on the film. And I always tell my students, the more personal a project, the more universal it becomes. And this project really started as something very personal for me. I was looking at approaching the age of 50, which I think, especially for women, that half-century mark is really a milestone. And looking for positive role models of aging and just not seeing them. And everything that I saw in the media was all about what you could do to avoid aging, like anti-aging creams and how you could look, in quotes, youthful. I wanted to look my age. I wanted to celebrate my age. I didn't want to necessarily use all those creams and look younger. I was pretty happy with where I was at, but here the media was telling me that wasn't good enough. And in my own family, I had this amazing role model of my grandmother, who at the time was approaching 100. and still working out at the gym. And she did not start working out until she was 80. So it definitely proved to me that it's never too late to start something new, even working out at the gym. And I was lucky enough that I went to her 100th birthday party, and she was working out at the gym, I thought, before the party, and I thought I better film her because nobody's going to believe that at age 100 she's still working out at the gym. And I had a mic on her, thankfully, and I said to her, "Hey, Grandma, can you give me some words of wisdom?" And she said things like, "Be kind and live life to the limits." And I came back from that trip. I came back to California from Florida, and I put together a little 1 minute clip of my grandmother at the gym and her little story. And I thought, I need to find other people out there like my grandmother who are over the age of 75, who are living full and really rich lives that I can have as my role models. So I'm not a social scientist, I'm an artist. I was not looking for everyone over 75. I really was just looking for people that had really positive outlooks on life that I could emulate as I was moving into my 50th birthday and beyond. And so that's really how I got started.
Well, you found 40 people.
Yeah.
I just recently watched. I'm for those of you watching on YouTube, you see I'm holding up the book. There is everything is in our show notes below. Link to where you can watch the film Lives Well Lived. As you can see, if you're watching behind Sky, she has a beautiful screensaver behind her. And you can also grab the book. I didn't have time to read the book since we left Rhode Island and saw each other, but I did have time to watch the film. And you achieved it. I mean, those 40 people, just listening to the words of advice, it's powerful. It's powerful. And it wakes you up a little bit to, okay, am I being a victim in my life? Am I getting stuck in complaining? Am I wishing for something else and being happy for what I have right here in the moment? And it can also be affirming for somebody like me who is a mindset and happiness coach, and somebody who by nature is optimistic and not toxic, but just really I am. I forget, I wrote down the woman who said that she is overly optimistic. What did she
Oh,
say?
terminally optimistic. That was
Terminally op-
Rachel Wignon, and I love her phrase, which is that she's terminally optimistic because, she wakes up every day thinking something wonderful is going to happen, and sometimes it's postponed until the next day or the day after, but inevitably something wonderful is going to happen. And what a great mindset to have to go into every day with, right?
I wrote there it is. Eternally optimistic. I expect good things to happen. But yeah, the best part was when she says, and sometimes it might just happen like a few days later. I'm like, I
Yeah.
love this woman. She's
Yeah.
but I love that you did this because and I encourage everybody to watch the film and read the book. I'm reading the book next because to hear these human beings say it the way they say it, the context is there when you look at them and you see them and they share why they feel the way they feel. One of the other things I love, and then we're going to get into celebrating aging, was where did it say? I love this one. I'm going to write it. I wrote it down. Oh, Lucky Louie. I liked him. Lucky Louie. He
Yeah.
said, be happy. He said, it's a choice. He basically was saying it's a choice. But what he said was, be happy with what you have. You have a choice. You can either be happy with what you have or unhappy with what you don't have. So choose to be happy with what you have. He's always chosen to be happy with what he has, which means don't
Mhm.
focus on the lack. I loved him.
Yeah, I have to say that I know you're not supposed to have favorites in something like this, but Lucky Louie was definitely one of my favorites. And he was a really good friend. And I would go over, for those of you that haven't seen the film, he was a pediatrician in his earlier career. And then when he retired from that, he started making fresh mozzarellas for his daughter's deli. Because when he was a young man and he lived back in Brooklyn, his parents owned a deli. His father died when he was really young, and so he took over making the mozzarellas. And so he had it in his blood, I suppose. And then when his daughter had a deli, he started making the mozzarellas for his daughter's deli, and it was a ritual for him. And oh my God, to have that fresh mozzarella, there's nothing like that. It was so amazing.
And
He
he's
was,
making it the whole time he's talking
yes.
on there. I love it. So you talk about celebrating aging.
Mhm.
I mean, What do you mean when you tell when you make that statement? Because I know what it means to me, but
Yeah, I think it means different things to different people. I think for me personally, celebrating aging is celebrating the older adults in our lives and celebrating ourselves as we age and learning. I know I'm much more comfortable in my skin than I was when I was younger. And so I celebrate the things that I have in my life that I think are richer and maybe better because I have more years of experience, not because I'm necessarily wiser, but I think I just have more years of experience and a greater appreciation for the things that I have and the people in my life. And so I think when we celebrate aging and we're celebrating the wisdom and the wonderment and the lives of incredible human beings who, if we just take the time to listen, have so many stories to share with us and tell us. And those stories, if we really listen, can help us in our own lives.
absolutely. And because when you said that's what celebrating aging means to me too, and I know that when you started off by sharing what society does do, and it does. Like, I'm all for individual choices. If you decide you don't want to go all gray, that's fine. If you decide you want to go gray, that's fine too. I kind of like the little lines that are here. Like I'm like, I don't want everything. I mean, I wouldn't mind that gone, but I just pointed to my neck, everybody. But I was telling my friends, I go, I'm supposed to have these little lines right here when my smile line
Right.
to me, but other people don't like them. And I just think celebrating aging. I'm at the time we're recording this, I am 1 week away from turning 58. And I could either say, oh my God, it's 2 more years, I'm 60. I'm feeling so good. I'm not saying things don't hurt, but I'm having fun. And at the end of the documentary, you asked about like the fear of dying. I think
Mhm.
the fear, and all of their answers were wonderful. And I know like at least one person, if not all of them, said it in a different way. Well, I'm not thinking about that. Why think
Yeah.
about that? I'm living in the present. That was a big message that came through to celebrating. I think part of celebrating aging is learning with wisdom to live in the present because tomorrow's not promised. But here's the thing, I think we have a whole generation that if they can slow down just for a little bit, they'll realize they learned that lesson through the pandemic and through what happened, that we only are promised today. So
Mhm.
why worry about what's going to happen tomorrow? Because you're here today, so live life to the fullest. That's like the whole message I walked away with. And there's certain things I agree with that only come from age and wisdom. And yet what you're doing with bringing the generations together and really being a proponent for intergeneration connectedness
Mhm.
is to bring that wisdom to a younger generation. It's the ones that are open to hearing it. And there are ones open to hearing it. There are ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, I was lucky enough that I grew up in a four-generational household, including my great grandmother, my grandmother who I was super close to, and my mom. And, of course, I grew up in a household where I had friends that were older because I knew all of my grandparents' friends, and I would sit on the little ottoman with my great grandmother and learn how to knit and crochet. And so I had conversations with older adults. And I think that piqued my curiosity of wanting to learn more of storytelling, but also I learned that there was a lot of wisdom in really listening to people that had experience. I learned that very early on. But what I realized is that most people don't have that kind of connection with an older adult in their lives. And so one of the things that I've become really passionate about, as you mentioned, is connecting generations. And we started off using the Lives Well Lived film as kind of a catalyst to connect generations. I've worked with different educators across the country, but one in particular at the university where I teach, where we came up with this Lives Well Lived intergenerational project where we show the film to older adults and to students and to get everybody excited about wanting to learn more about the older adults' lives. And then the students and the older adults use the questions that I formulated, because I had about 20 questions that I asked everyone in the interviews, to get to know each other. I think the hardest thing when you put two people together in a room and you say, okay, do this project, get to know each other, is like, where do you start asking the questions? And I think if you just start off by saying, well, tell me something about yourself, it's way too wide open ended. And so I think distilling it down to the essence and giving a framework for that dialogue to happen. And it was a bilateral conversation, but it helps to steer that conversation. And at the end of the quarter, the students do a big presentation about all the things that they've learned, and the older adults chime in as well. And of course, it's so wonderful because the big common element that everyone says is that they realize they have far more in common than their differences, and really the only difference is their age. And, I feel like one of the things that's really, there's so many things that are upsetting in our world, but one of the things is that we have this very age diverse, age segregated, I should say, society where, people really stick to people just within their own age group. And I feel like the world is really suffering as a result that we don't have more communication and more collaboration between generations. So whatever I can do to bring generations together, I'm super excited about. And as you mentioned in my book, the first half of the book is really about all the lessons that I learned along the way of making the Lives Well Lived film. But the second half of the book is really about the beauty of connecting generations. And I interviewed 40 people around the globe. I like that number 40. So I interviewed 40 people around the globe who are doing amazing work connecting generations, whether it's through music or climate change or housing, whatever it is, all different ways that people are doing inspiring work to bring generations together.
Yeah, and it starts with respect. It starts with respect. Respecting, I do think, there's not everybody, but when, younger people see older people, they can be dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you watch this film, you're not going to be dismissive about anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you, I have a grandfather, my grandmother, my grandfather, my dad's parents came from Ukraine. And they both came here by way of Ellis Island.
Mm.
My grandfather in particular escaped during the pogroms with one of his brothers. And they both separately, they didn't know each other, came by way of Ellis Island, and that's where his story ends. He came here, he ended up in Cleveland, Ohio as a paper hanger. My grandmother got detained on Ellis Island because she was ill. And that's where that story ends. If my family's listening to this, sorry, I'm throwing you under the bus, myself too. But they have 3 children. My father, my aunt, my uncle, and nobody got their stories. They have a story.
Yeah.
I mean, my grandfather escaped from the pogroms. I mean, and oh my God. And nobody knows his story. Not one grandchild thought to do it. Nothing. And that's
Well, it's interesting because one of the questions that I asked everyone in the film is, do you have any regrets? And the biggest regret that people have is not capturing the story or asking questions of somebody that had passed away, because you do think you have all the time in the world. And then, of course, something happens unexpectedly because, as you said before, no day is promised. And then they're not there to ask those questions anymore. And I feel very lucky that I was always inquisitive and curious. And even from the time that I was really young, like I would say between 10 and 13, I'm Italian. So we'd have anyone that's Italian out there will, half of me is the Jewish side. So I can relate to the pogroms because my grandfather on that side also escaped the pogroms. But on the Italian side, we would have dinners on Sunday from 2 o'clock to like 6 or 7 o'clock, right? You just sit around the table for hours. And I'm dating myself a little bit because I would have a cassette recorder that I would put on the table when after the meal was sort of done, and we'd have like the fruits and the nuts, and people were just sitting around and telling stories, because I knew something was special happening at that moment, and I wanted to capture those stories. And I wanted to not only capture the stories, but the sound of the voices of my grandparents and their friends saying those stories. And I don't even know what happened to those recordings, but I think that was my first foray into realizing how important these stories really were to collect, and that they were important to me. They were important enough as a, preteen to think about putting that recorder on the table to want to collect those stories.
Yeah, no, I wasn't curious. I didn't have patience. And you just remind me of something. I just sidebar. So during the pandemic, my mother in high school, she grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. She went to Cleveland Heights High, for anybody out there, woo woo. She asked me to put together a Zoom for 15 of our high school friends. They were ahead of their time. They had like a sorority in high school called UTS, United
Wow.
through UT, United Through Service, or something like that. And I've hosted at least half a dozen Zooms for them. I've never recorded it.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
I will record that. I've taken screenshots but I'm have this front row seat. I sit there on mute and I have this front row seat hearing stories,
Hmm.
which is wonderful. And like I love it now when I'm older, but when I was younger, I didn't even think to do it. Didn't even think.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but
Well, and
we'll
I feel like I really, in doing this film, I really gave myself the gift of taking my time. I really had no pressure as to when I was going to get the film done because I was self-financing it. I wasn't working with somebody, I wasn't under the gun. So I really took my time and sometimes went back and re-interviewed people, but I spent 4 years interviewing 40 people with a collective life experience of 3,000 years. So I really took my time with it. And how often do we do that? I mean, I would venture to say that everyone has an amazing story to tell if we just take the time to listen. And you, as a podcast host, you do that. But most people don't take the time to really just sit down and intently listen. And I feel like it was such a gift for me and for the people that were telling their stories because they got to share their stories and feel like they were heard and feel like those stories will be preserved. And so I learned a ton and my life is forever changed, but so are theirs in some other fashion as well.
absolutely. You did it beautiful. It's beautiful. And yeah, I didn't
Thank
realize that it was self-funded. So you really were able to take your time. That's important.
Yeah.
We're going to get back to a dare around that later. But I do want to talk about because I think everybody, this film and the book is also about showing you, and you have it here. You have lives well lived, generations, resilience, positivity, and purpose at every age. And it's possible. And that's part of what the messaging of our show, the purpose of me starting the show is it's for midlife women experiencing transitions such as empty nest, caring for our aging parents, retirement, not liking our careers, figuring out what our third act is, whatever you call it. And it started for me for empty nest moms rediscovering their purpose and reconnecting that, and it's never too late. And I think that you really captured that with these 40 people and how you shared their stories, that they all have found and refound purpose, resilient, and positivity. And and some of them have been through, I mean, you're talking about some of them have been to the Japanese internment camps here in America, in the concentration camps. I was separated and sent to a different country from their parents and fostered for years until, I mean, crazy stories, but yet I walked away with, okay, yes, we can find purpose, resilience, and positivity at any age.
Absolutely. And I think the three common themes that I saw emerge from all the 40 people that I interviewed, and that's why the subtitle of the book is this was really having a sense of purpose, knowing that that can change over time. I think especially as people retire or start changing careers, or that's when our sense of purpose and maybe our equilibrium is a little like off kilter. And so I think having that sense of purpose and knowing that it can change over time is super important. I think the second thing was that they all had a good support system of family or friends. It didn't necessarily have to be family. I think, it could be friends, but they felt like they were part of a community, part of a group of people that they could call on. And I think we're seeing in studies that the loneliness factor is huge in terms of decreasing our life expectancy if we fall into that category of not having friends and being alone. So I think being surrounded by people and knowing that even if you're not surrounded by them quite literally, but knowing that like your friends had your mom's friends on the Zoom, she knew she
Yeah.
could do that. And I think finding interesting ways to make that happen in different varying times and also with physical limitations that come in. There are different ways that we can gather and feel like we still are part of something. And then I think thirdly is really this is a cliche, but you kind of alluded to it with Lucky Louie's quote, seeing life as a glass is half full rather than half empty. And I'm really reminded of Evie Justison, who when was turning 50, she read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which if you haven't read it, it's an amazing book. And he was a Holocaust survivor who really couldn't determine who is going to survive based on their physical strength. It was much more about their emotional strength. And what she took away from that, which I have like taken into my own life, is that there are so many times in our lives where we cannot control the things that are happening around us. But what we do have control over is our attitude about how we deal with those things. And I think that's the positivity and resilience side of things. And I'm, often reminded about all those people, as you mentioned in the film, that dealt with these very traumatic things, but that resilience and the way that they are able to reflect back on that and look back on it with a different kind of attitude helps shape how they move forward. And on a kind of a funny note, Lucky Louie, who again was one of my all-time favorites. I could listen to his stories for days.
Yeah.
And he was telling me this story about driving up to San Francisco, and he had borrowed a car for some reason, and somehow he got rear-ended, but he was lucky because the car was still drivable. So they keep driving. They have a flat tire. He's lucky because there's another tire, so you can put it on the car. Gets all the way up to San Francisco for this convention that he's going to be part of, and they had canceled the convention. So he says, wow, we're lucky. We get to just spend the day in San Francisco and have fun. So at every point in time, he was able to reframe it. Somebody else would have been really upset. And, this is like a lighthearted sort of thing, but it was really his way of dealing with life, is turning whatever situation was happening, turning it around and trying to make it something positive. And I think that was a gift that he left me, was like really looking at how is my attitude contributing to make this situation better or worse? And I think we can all do a little bit of that.
Oh, absolutely. I call when I shared in Rhode Island, looking for the good, looking
Right,
and going for that 3-to-1 ratio. There's always a gift in the mess. That's
right.
what he's saying. That's what Lucky Louie is telling us. There's always a gift. There's another story. I'm not going to get into a story about a man with a horse and a whole thing, like things happen and the townspeople say, "Oh my God, that's terrible." He goes, "No, well, who knows if it's good? Who knows if it's bad?" And, but I like that story, and that was a powerful moment for me when he said that. And yeah, with her attitude about Viktor Frankl, that you can't control. Life happens.
Yes.
How we navigate what life throws at us that will determine how we're going to live our lives. And it's not easy. It's a practice. This is all practice.
Hmm.
I mean, these people cry and get upset and get knocked down and get hurt and get angry. They just know how to come out of it quicker. That's
Absolutely. Yes. And one of my favorite lines from the movie, which came from Barbara Dreyfus, and she said, "Life plays with you, doesn't it?" And
Yeah, she
know,
did say that. She said, she did.
yeah.
The other thing, I love this too. From Marion, I have your book. I love this. She wrote, it's really important that you make the most of every day. You never know what tomorrow will bring. You can't get out of life if you don't put anything into life. It's like anything else. There's no free ride.
Mm.
They all had words. They all had major words of it. I could go quote them. I wrote, literally, I'm showing Sky for now, like 2 scribbled pages of notes when I was watching. I mean, I was watching, the last one I want to say, where is it? Because I love this one. It was about grief, because so much grief happens in our life. I have friends that are grieving, they become a widow or unexpected, or you lose people you love. And obviously, as you age, you lose people.
Hmm.
Actually, it's happening to younger people like our generation too. But I think, I don't know, it was Louis. It was Lucky Louie again. God, he's getting a lot of press on this show. Lucky Louie, he said, because he said he was married and he held up his hand when making the motivation. He said, "I'm still married, always married." He didn't feel like he could ever find that love again, but he's happy. But he wrote, "Grieving never stops. The intensity just decreases."
Yeah.
I
And,
wrote that down.
I'll tell you, that man was something else. And I knew him really well. And I felt so lucky that he let me ask that question. At that point, and this is the good thing about doing a film over a 4-year period, because I had done an interview with him early on. And that second interview that you saw where he said that about grief, that was maybe 3 or 4 years down the road. It was towards the end of my filming. And I said to him, "Lou, I don't know if you're comfortable with this or not, but I want to ask you this question because you're obviously still so in love with your wife. How do you do that?" And that was when he answered me. And I think, for anyone that wants to do filmmaking or storytelling, you have to build a sense of trust with the people that you are working with. And I think I think the greatest gift, because I did this project over 4 years, was that I had plenty of time to build that trust and to, I think, get more authentic stories as a result and responses to questions.
Yeah, it really looked like they were enjoying themselves.
Yeah, so was I.
I know you were. So before we get to the dare, is there anything you want to share with our audience? Anything at all? Anything about lives well lived, generations, anything about intergenerational connectedness, anything about something coming up or anything, any message? Because I love when my guests can just leave their message. What is your parting message before the dare for our audience, if you have one?
Well, I would say whatever you can do to connect with somebody of a different generation, do it. Whether it's you see somebody on the street and they're a different age group and you just say hello to them and you start a conversation, it can be as simple as that, because I think whatever we can do to start breaking down those barriers is just so wonderful. And if you are so inspired that you want to interview somebody from a different generation, I have that all on the website of how to do that and the questions that I started with. So I think, again, just having that, like I talked about before, having that framework sometimes makes it a little bit easier to have that conversation. So you can blame me for the questions, but at least it's a starting point. And I'm sure that'll be in the show notes as to where you can find all of that on our
Absolutely,
website.
absolutely. So you have the framework for intergenerations to sit down and the questions you gave.
Yep,
You
I have it on a part of our website called Take Action. There's everything that you need to I even have a little video of how best practices on doing an interview, because
you have
I
like
was new to all this. So it was easy for me to say, this is what I did wrong. Here's what you can do right when you do an interview with somebody. And it's just like a very quick video, but it's, I think, helpful for people that have never done anything like this before. And I would encourage people, even if you don't have a video and you just do an audio recording or you just write it down, you will not regret taking that time to spend with somebody. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make them feel better. And you'll have that story forever. And I think that that's something that you can cherish and know that it's really something positive for both parties on that. But yes, let's bring the generations together. That would be my parting words.
That's your dare. That's your dare, everybody. Your dare. So before we outline the dare and summarize it, let me ask you a quick, would the framework work? Because my mind's working. Like if I wanted myself, my daughter, and my mom, the three of us to sit together, would the framework work for multiple people in a room, like a certain group?
Yeah, absolutely. All the questions that I asked are on the website. So you can start off with those questions. And even if you just pick 5 questions, let's say, that you all want to answer, that's kind of a nice way you can do it, a round robin sort of thing. That's great to do it that way. And one other thing, which is that when I did the film, I realized that I had to stop interviewing people or I would never have gotten a film done. So there is a place on the website where people can actually share their stories and be part of the Lives Well Lived community. So even though I couldn't interview everyone, there's so many amazing people out there that you can be part of it just by doing an interview and just a written one with a photo, and we'll post you on the website.
Oh, I love that. All right, so that's your dare. Your dare is to capture the stories or interview or bring intergeneration together, whatever way you want to do it, one-on-one with somebody or together, bring the generation together and interview each other. Go grab the questions from Sky's the website. It is in the show notes below. You've given us the tools to do it. So your dare is to plan this. Give it as a gift to somebody in your family. It's a gift to everybody. But like, I know that would be a gift for my mom. If I said, we're going to sit down and I am going to interview you and capture your story, Mom, I want to know your story. So that's your dare. Love that. Sky, thank you so much for being on Beyond Emptiness. This was a really important conversation. I love the work you're doing. I hope we get to see each other in person next year at Quest 2025.
I hope so too.
And everybody, what is it from this episode that you're taking away? What is your aha or your big takeaway? That's the point. Our mission of every episode is that you get at least one thing. I know there's more than one here, but what's the one thing from this conversation with Sky Bergman that you had a light bulb go off or just say, yeah, or made you feel good? I want to hear about it. Sky wants to hear about it. Let us know leave a review, leave a comments on YouTube, email me. I'll make sure Sky hears. Check out how you can get in contact with Sky, get the information on the questions on how you can start today connecting with the older adults around you and in your life. And don't forget that there'll be another episode next week. And as I always say, dare on. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond Empty Nest. For detailed show notes and more information, be sure to visit jodysilverman.com. Have you heard of the Double Darers? Well, we're a community of moms and midlife women blending virtual and in-person interactions for connection, support, and exciting experiences. From Mommy and Me classes to soccer sidelines, moms have always found strength in community. And as we navigate the empty nest and other midlife transitions, having that go-to safe space and other women to lean on is a must. Ladies, this is not the chapter to do it alone. Our drama-free group echoes the sentiment of the Cheers theme song, a place where everybody knows your name and our troubles are all the same. If you've been seeking connection and have a desire to figure out who you are and what your purpose is now, then Moms Who Double Dare is the perfect fit for you. Only through the link in our show notes below can you explore and enjoy the first month at half off. Plus, with no contracts, there's zero risk involved. Join us today and get started on your journey of self-discovery, surrounded by new friends who understand and get you. You've sent your kids off to brave new experiences, meet new people, and discover who they get to be. Now, it's your turn. It's your turn to embrace this new adventure. If you're ready to dare on, I'm here to lead the way. Let's embark on this exciting journey together. Click the link below, and as I always say, dare on.